I got a tiger by the tail. My experience in Simpson has made me a different person, and I am stuck now thinking that there are world problems and there are national problems, and I know how to fix them. I'm serious. And so we started a nonprofit organization called the Center for Wise Democracy, based on what was learned at Simpson and turning around Corbell Sawmill and involving the hourly employees in the same way that the citizens today are kind of excluded. They were excluded. And I brought some show and tell stuff, but I have, I wrote a book a few years ago called Society's Breakthrough. I wrote a couple copies, Releasing Essential Wisdom and Virtue in All the People. And I thought when I wrote this that the magic sauce was a constitutional amendment. And now that's changed, and I realize that we can just do it. And we can do it at the global level, we can do it at the national level, and we're actually starting to make progress. For instance, 2 states of Austria have now changed their state constitution because they've written my book, I guess. I mean, partly, but to include what we call the Wisdom Council. And honestly, it's all based on what happened at Corbell. It's all based on really Paul keeping a safe space for me and others to experiment. And one of the things that Paul did is that every year, for 7 years, I don't know if Simpson could justify this, but every year he sent us to a week at a conference called the Creative Problem Solving Institute. And what that meant to me was we should be able to face impossible to solve problems, be creative, have breakthroughs, and then solve them. That's the point of creativity, am I right? I mean, we should be able to solve impossible problems. But I was a little bit disappointed in Simpson, and I took my disappointment into the mill and worked with hourly employees. How do we facilitate this creative thinking to get that to happen? And made some exciting discoveries, but I didn't know. I didn't know what was happening really. But then when I left Paul, we took a year off in 1985, moving to Port Townsend. And then I started realizing I could teach others, so I started teaching seminars on this process. And I've now taught them. My last one I was in Munich, the one before that one was in Moscow, the next one's in Sweden, the one after that's in northern Italy. So I've been teaching these seminars all over the world on what is called dynamic facilitation. How do we facilitate this quality of thinking by which people can solve impossible to solve problems. And in the seminars, what we do is everybody breaks into small groups, and you pick an issue. Like, let me ask you, what is fundamentally the most significant issue we face as a nation?
Income inequality.
Income inequality. Just throw something out. What's fundamentally the most significant issue we face as a nation? What?
Education.
Education. Missing the education.
Loss of confidence in our political system.
Loss of what? Confidence in the political system. Right. There's no wrong answers, by the way. Let's hear one or two more. Population growth. Unending.
Yeah. Illegal immigration.
You got 2 of them.
I know.
So, but all of these issues have energy behind them. They're all about how they feel impossible to solve, like we can't do anything. But if we could somehow call time out, if you had a whistle go whoop, and everybody stops and steps aside as a nation, and we all visit together respectfully, and we say, well, hey, let's work on this. Let's change our minds to work on this in this creative way, and we'll just do it for a day or a couple hours even, and then we'll go back into normal life. And then in 4 months, we take another time out and we meet. And this is exactly what happened in the mill. Except we did it with hourly employees. We did it just an hour a week, had 10 or 12. And they would work on their most impossible to solve problem, the one they cared about the most. And they would have creative breakthroughs. And when that group would achieve a breakthrough, they would bond like this. And the crazy thing is, the part that it took me years to notice, was that the whole mill was in the conversation. In other words, even though it was just those 10 people or whatever, the whole mill was hearing about it and commenting and talking between sessions. We were meeting an hour a week, and the whole mill was in this timeout, let's talk and think in this new way. Okay, let's go back to work and just be like that. And so just that stopping and thinking, it's kind of like meditation or recreation or taking a retreat or you name it. It's anytime you do that kind of stepping back, you bring a consciousness to what you're doing. And you start thinking not only an individual consciousness, but a collective consciousness. Another word for that is we the people. If we could set up, you and I, a few of us, could set up that whistle and time out where all of us could somehow come together, just an hour every 4 months or so, if that could just happen, where we work on what's most important and we do it in a respectful, creative way, and we have shifts and breakthroughs, and we come up with some kind of unity that gets exciting, then what essentially we've done is we've taken our current system and we've added back the missing ingredient, the we the people part, where we the people are supposedly talking and thinking and working together and being in charge. Or we could set up changes to our constitutional structure, for instance, or we could set up a shared vision and work toward achieving that vision together. And what I noticed was that this process happened for 350 people in the mill, even though I was only working with 10. I'm only working with 10 people in the mill, and all 350 are involved in that conversation, and they are moving forward with totally new attitude, going down to the union hall and saying, no, we don't want to have this fight. We actually want to learn that material. We don't want to fight that. And they would go and they would start innovating. They would start seeing, oh my goodness, look at all that piled up lumber. Let's see if we can't fix that. We don't want that to happen. And it became one of these places where people, I remember going to the foreman after the first year. They didn't want to be a part of it when they just got started. I remember going back to them at the end of the first year, and both the day shift and night shift foreman started crying because they just didn't know we could be this way and didn't know that could be possible. So how do we do it? Well, let me tell you about what happened in Austria, for instance. Recently, they now have like I say, they have a constitutional amendment, and the amendment says that every 6 months there will be a wisdom council where they randomly select like 24 citizens, and they bring them together.
That's important. Say that again. Randomly.
Totally random. 100% random. Random, like a lottery. So if we did it for the United States, a lottery. You just get the 24 that show up. You bring them to one location, and they are facilitated for a day and a half. And in this case, recently they had one on the Syrian refugees, because they got the Syrian refugees pouring across the border. And what the Wisdom Council said was, first of all, they don't know what to say at first, but they're being facilitated so that no matter what anybody says, it's included in the puzzle, and we're all face these charts, and we're trying to solve this problem together. So nobody ever feels excluded or put down or judged. It's all, whatever anybody says gets added to the pile. And we're trying to be creative in making sense of that pile. And so there were a number of shifts and breakthroughs along the way, like when one person announced that he actually was an immigrant and really had been embarrassed to tell anybody for years, but when he was a young kid, and another guy said, well, actually, we have neighbors that are Syrian refugees, and we're getting to know them, and they're really helping. And so little comments like that, people would keep building on. And so what this group said was, yes, we do not want our culture undermined, and we do not want terrorist threats. But these people really need us, and we can really help them. And so that's really what we want to do as a society. And then they're gone. So you randomly select them, they present their position, unanimous position.
To whom?
Well, ideally they present it to the people of the state. But the way Austria set it up, they present it to the legislature. So the legislature shuts down on a Friday afternoon, and they all walk into their foyer, into the foyer of their building, and they sit at tables. And then the Wisdom Council comes on stage, and they present their unity on this issue, and then they're done. And then the legislators talk at their tables about what was said. And what happens is it completely transforms the nature of their conversation. No longer is it a blue team versus red team kind of thing. Now it's a visit knowing what the voice of the citizens is saying. And that voice changes everything. So what one of the legislators said, and I love this quote, he said, the Wisdom Council is wind at my back. And another one said, no elected official could have said that. What the Wisdom Council said could not have been said by any elected official, or they would have been stomped on. So, in other words, there's just no way to have that creative, collaborative conversation in our system today. It requires this kind of stepping back, being together. So I am really, what I thought was needed to create a We the People when I wrote my book 15 years ago was a constitutional amendment that convened this coming together of the people. And that's what they did in those two states of Austria, Vorarlberg and Salzburg. And now Vienna is actually thinking about it, and there's a group that are advocating to the Austrians for a national wisdom council. So, but I thought it required a constitutional amendment. But now I realize that what it really requires is just that stepping back and thinking at this higher level, where I call it choice creating instead of decision making, because it's a creative thinking process. And I'm really optimistic. I think about doing this globally does not take much. We need media, we need money, we need, I don't know, maybe $10 million could do it. We need media, money, and a few people that have the facilitative understandings of what's happening. And we can also do it at the national level. We don't need anybody's permission. We don't need to get the permission of Congress to go ahead and do this. So this is something that just can be set up as a reality TV show. So that's where we are right now. A lot of this hasn't been written up properly. yet, still doing that. But the answer, see, what you wouldn't run a Girl Scout troop this way to have, even though you and I love what the founders did 230 years ago, it's a little crazy to imagine that we can keep running on what their image of democracy. They didn't want democracy, by the way. They wanted a republic. There has to be a we the people. There has to be a voice of we the people today. And that doesn't mean a majority, doesn't mean people demonstrating in the streets, it doesn't mean any of that. It means this heartfelt, thoughtful, respectful, creative conversation where we're trying to find out what's best for everybody and we're working together to get it. And if you and I can facilitate that conversation, well, I don't see how we're going to continue to have these problems. But if we continue to just trust in the machinery designed in the 19th century, in the 18th century, I don't see how it can work. So it's not, I think they were heroes, absolute heroes. They were the founders of our society. They were absolute heroes. It was a miracle what they did. It may be the most important document in ever, but it's not. We today have to wake up and come together and choose how we're going to live. We today have modern conveniences like flush toilets and roads and stuff like that, internet, not to mention the internet. So all of the, I have this really, really, really soft place in my heart for Paul and what happened at Simpson and the protection that Paul gave me. He essentially created a laboratory for me to fool around in and to begin to develop some ideas. And I didn't mean to, but it's just it just it just made sense. It just kept following this trail of breadcrumbs. And right now, as I stand before you, I'm all struggling trying to write something up. But there's a Swedish billionaire who has looked at climate change, for instance, and said, my God, I don't see how this can be solved without global governance of some kind. And I'll offer a prize, $5 million, $1 to $5 million, if somebody can figure out how to create global governance in the short term that could work. Well, that's what I've been working on all summer, and I want to prepare that. And maybe I'll keep Paul posted and make sure you know that we need to win that, and then we can really get started. So, anyway, any questions? Yeah.
How long have you been in place in this?
In Austria, about 6 or 7 years. About 7 years. And see, I taught these seminars around the world, and I taught one I wrote an article about the Wisdom Council, and I gave one in Frankfurt, and somebody from Austria came. And then he came back again. It was a 4-day seminar. And then he came back a third time, and this time he brought 8 or 9 people. And they met in the small groups working on impossible to solve problems, and their problems were, how do we fix our problems?
And how many impossible to solve problems have there been?
How many? Well, see, honestly, not that many, because they're just now beginning to understand how to use this process. They've been giving them the low-hanging fruit and thinking that, gee, they can't handle it. This process is really designed for the impossible to solve problems, not the low-hanging fruit. And so it's a new thing. But they've got one planned. Oh, I forgot to tell you one other thing in this. I never described the amendment. The amendments that they amended their constitution. One is they do it every 6 months. The governor gets to pick the issue, and then the parliament picks the issue. The government, then the parliament. And the parliament takes turns. They have 4 parties, and they take turns. Now, as a citizen, if you can get just 1,000 signatures, you get to pick the issue. And you give it, and then the government will sponsor a wisdom council process on your issue. So you should all say, ooh, because that would be so cool. I mean, that means the Muslim, for instance, can say, do it on theirs, rather than, they're trying to outlaw the what do they call those, spinnerets or something, in the architecture. They could say, well, look, we don't want that, so let's have a talk about it, that kind of thing. So this fall will be the first hot issue chosen by the citizens this fall. First time ever used. And the issue is what sounds pretty dull, land use planning, but the reality is Austria is so beautiful, these mountains and everything, and then, of course, the corporations and everything want to use the land for building plants and business parks and things like that, and the people, a lot of people don't want that, and so it's an economics versus land issue, and so that's happening this fall for the first time, and it's the first bottom-up issue. So, yeah, Bryce.
Jim, you talk about the activities in a number of different countries. What's happening in this country, and is there a difference, and why would you think there's such a difference?
Boy, I have gotten nowhere here, honestly. And frankly, until Trump was elected, I didn't see much prospect. But now it's pretty good, because people are all, they're all lined up on the blue team and the red team and ready to do battle, and many people are looking around, hey, recognizing that our system might not be really all that great, and maybe there's some process. So in our country, we were fortunate. We had a phenomenal founding experience, and other countries didn't. But they look across and they see what the U.S. is doing, and they don't think it's all that cool, frankly. But we think this is the best there is. And anybody who challenges that is, something's wrong with them. And so, but I think people today are beginning to become open-minded about, in this country too, about, hey, maybe our system isn't perfect. And maybe there is some things we could do. And see, this doesn't really involve changing anything. This isn't replacing anything with anything. All this does is add a conversation to what we already have, so that we the people can say, so that now we the people. Now we have a voice of the public interest, which we don't have. There's no voice of the public interest today in our system. No room for it. I mean, there's lots of people saying they are. The environmentalists demonstrate in the streets, but they're actually a special interest by definition, because that's the only thing our system can manage. Can't have a competition of special interests forever. We have to come back to the public interest. What is the public interest? We have to have that conversation, I think.
We have to discover it.
We have to discover it. We have to discover the public interest. Yeah. Other questions or issues or concerns?
I have a request.
Yeah.
Would you give this lecture in North Korea?
Well, see, now, I think this is the way to do it. This is how you address North Korea. Everybody wants to tell you, oh, there's only 3 things we can do in North Korea. There's only 3. That's it. Done. We're through. They don't. As soon as you start thinking creatively, oh, well, there's lots of possibilities. So if you and I could facilitate a global we the people, well, now we've got a different world. Now we have a different world. Now, I mean, just the invitation. There's no way we're all in competition with North Korea by definition. I think there's no way to get that happening. But why do they want why does North Korea want their weapons? What's going on? What's crazy here? And this is how wars have happened all along, is we're missing the we the people conversation, and then where we invite the nations to create a new global government, for instance. It isn't about the governments figuring that out, and nations figuring that out, and then negotiating away their power. It's about we the people of the world finally coming together and saying, how do we want to work things out? Do we want to run this risk of nuclear holocaust? No, I don't think so. So, and where, honestly, you know, one thing I should say again, I stand on experience. I know this works. But if I'm honest with myself and you, where I stand the most is at Corbell. Seeing those people, being able to go back every day and talking to them and realizing, my God, didn't you just punch a hole in that wall yesterday and now you're talking like this? You know, to see the transformation in each person. Remember you two hated each other? Why you're going to go double dating? You know, I mean, it was glorious. But I had a special opportunity to experience those transformations, and so now I know they really happen. It isn't. People aren't just a certain way, and that's the way they stay. So, thank you for the question. Thank you.
Any more questions?
Well, let me want to say one other thing. I was thinking about. I'm always making charts and stuff, so I brought one of my charts for the nation. You know, the different solutions, the problem that we face. What I tried to pick a problem that would grab everybody's, and then the different solutions that people are saying are standing on. And then I think if we're honest, we'll realize none of those are going to work, but this one might. So that's the handout. Yeah.
Those of you who would like this, we'll put it over here on this table and you can pick up.
Yeah, and I also would invite anybody who gets turned on to this. We need your help. You know, I don't know what it is, but if you can convene a fundraising party sometime, or just I don't know, just tell somebody, your neighbor, about, hey, so I met this guy and he thinks there's a simple solution to all this. Whatever, you know, whatever level of interest, checking out the website.
But it's not a simple solution.
Well, okay, Paul and I go back and forth. Thank you, Paul. Thanks.
Yeah.